For 3 straight games in Raleigh, North Carolina, the same 2 words rained down from the stands every time Carter Hart touched the puck. No means no. Thousands of Carolina Hurricanes fans, chanting in unison inside the Lenovo Center, all of it aimed at the man standing in the Vegas Golden Knights goal crease. For most of this Stanley Cup Final, Hart said nothing. He kept his mask down and let the noise wash over him. But on Saturday, one day before the most important game of his career, he finally answered. And what he said tells you everything about where this story now stands. To understand why an entire arena turned on one goaltender, you have to go back to the summer of 2018. Carter Hart was once one of the brightest young goaltenders in the National Hockey League. A first-round talent, the supposed future of the Philadelphia Flyers, a kid who looked destined to wear the orange and black for 15 years. He was also a member of Canada's 2018 World Junior team, the group that won gold and was celebrated at a Hockey Canada Foundation gala in London, Ontario. It was after that gala that the allegations began. A woman, known publicly only as EM to protect her identity, accused 5 players from that team of sexual assault in a hotel room that night. For years, the case stayed in the shadows. Then in January of 2024, formal charges were filed, and Hart was charged with 1 count of sexual assault. Within days, he stepped away from the Flyers and took an indefinite leave from hockey. 4 of his former teammates, Michael McLeod, Cal Foote, Dylan Dube, and Alex Formanton, were charged as well. The case became one of the most closely watched legal stories in the history of Canadian sport. The trial unfolded in London, Ontario, last summer, and the entire hockey world watched. The proceedings were tense, detailed, and deeply uncomfortable for everyone involved. In the end, Justice Maria Carroccia delivered the verdict. She ruled that the prosecution had not met the burden required to convict, and she stated that she did not find the complainant's testimony in the case to be credible. All 5 players were found not guilty. They were acquitted on every count. In the eyes of the court, the matter was closed. But a not guilty verdict in a courtroom does not always translate to forgiveness in the stands. Some fans saw a young man whose career was nearly destroyed by an accusation he was cleared of. Others felt that an acquittal did not erase their discomfort with the case. That gap between a legal verdict and public opinion is the entire reason this Stanley Cup Final has carried a shadow that no goal or save could erase. After the verdict, the National Hockey League made its move. On October 15th of 2025, the league reinstated all 5 players, making them eligible to sign with NHL clubs starting on the 1st of December. For most of the group, no immediate offer came. Formanton ended up playing in Switzerland. But Carter Hart, still only in his 20s and still carrying real talent, drew interest. The Vegas Golden Knights signed him to a 2-year contract worth $4 million. It was a calculated gamble by a franchise that has always been willing to take them, and it paid off in the most dramatic way imaginable. Hart started every single one of Vegas's 21 playoff games, carrying the Golden Knights through 3 rounds and all the way to the Stanley Cup Final. The redemption story was right there for the taking. The problem was that not everyone wanted to see it happen. When the final shifted to Raleigh, Carolina Hurricanes fans were ready for him. The chant had reportedly been organized in advance on a Hurricanes fan forum, a coordinated plan with one simple goal: get inside Hart's head. So every time he settled into his crease at the Lenovo Center, the building filled with those same 3 syllables. No means no. It rolled down from the upper decks through all 3 home games in North Carolina. Some called it a brutal, calculated form of psychological warfare designed to rattle a goaltender on the sport's biggest stage. Others called it a fan base refusing to let a court verdict be the final word on the conversation. Whatever you call it, it was impossible to ignore. The chant became one of the dominant storylines of the entire series, in some ways bigger than the hockey itself. And game after game, Hart simply absorbed it in total silence. If you are following every twist of this Stanley Cup Final, hit subscribe, because this story is nowhere near finished. Now let's get to what Hart actually said, and the collapse that made it matter even more. Here is where it gets complicated, because while the off-ice noise grew louder, Hart's play on the ice was falling apart. Through the first 5 games of this final, he allowed 4 or more goals in every single contest, one of the worst stretches by a starting goaltender in the history of the championship round. In Game 5, the Hurricanes lit him up in a 4-2 win that pushed Vegas to the brink of elimination. Any other coach might have pulled him, but Vegas head coach John Tortorella did the opposite. He stood at the podium and defended his goaltender with total conviction, naming Hart the starter for the do-or-die Game 6. Tortorella doubled down even as critics argued that backup Adin Hill deserved the call. And to make the mountain even steeper, Vegas just lost center William Karlsson to an arm injury, ruling out one of their most important players for the biggest game of their season. So, on Saturday, with his team facing elimination and the cameras rolling, Carter Hart finally addressed the Chants for the first time. Sitting at the podium beside teammate Mitch Marner, he was asked directly about the no means no chants from Hurricanes fans. His answer was 3 words long: it's just noise. He went on to say that both buildings had been loud, that both atmospheres had been a lot of fun to play in, and that he was treating the hostility like background static. No anger, no long speech, no attempt to relitigate anything, just noise. For a player who has spent years at the center of a national firestorm, it was a striking display of composure. Or, depending entirely on who you ask, a refusal to engage with something that still matters deeply to a lot of people. And now everything comes down to one night. Game 6 of the 2026 Stanley Cup Final takes place tonight at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. If Carter Hart and the Golden Knights win, they force a deciding Game 7 back in Raleigh, and those same chants almost certainly follow him there. If they lose, the Carolina Hurricanes lift the Stanley Cup for the first time in 20 years, and Hart's season ends under the weight of those same 2 words. One way or another, this is the night the most polarizing story in hockey reaches its breaking point. So, what do you think? Is this fair pressure on a man the court's cleared, or a fan base exercising its right to be heard? Tell me in the comments, and if you want the full breakdown of the Hockey Canada trial that started it all, that video is on your screen right now. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Right now, in the middle of the biggest series of his career, one Vegas Golden Knights player just broke a record that's never been touched in the franchise's entire history. Not Mark Stone, not Jonathan Marchessault, not even Jack Eichel, Brett Howden, the guy most casual fans couldn't pick out of a lineup at the start of this postseason, now has more playoff goals in a single year than any Golden Knight ever has. And he did it while his team is fighting for its life in the Stanley Cup Final. This is the story of how a player nobody was talking about quietly became the most important name on a cup contender. Let's start with who Brett Howden actually is, because most people watching this have probably heard his name 100 times without really knowing his story. Howden was a first-round pick by the New York Rangers back in 2016, the kind of prospect scouts loved for his size, his hockey IQ, and his ability to play in every situation. But in New York, he never quite broke out. He was a solid 3rd or 4th line center, a guy you'd describe as reliable, dependable, the kind of player who does a lot of the dirty work that never shows up on a highlight reel. Then came the trade that changed everything. Howden was sent to Vegas as part of a package, and almost overnight, his career found a new gear. Vegas has built its entire identity around depth scoring. Their philosophy is simple: every line should be able to hurt you, not just the top one. And Howden, more than maybe any other player on the roster, has become the living embodiment of that philosophy. Now picture the start of this year's playoffs. Vegas opens the postseason, and Howden starts doing something he's never done before at this level. He's not just chipping in a goal here and there, he's scoring in bunches. A goal in the first round against a team that was supposed to shut his line down completely. Then another. And another. By the time Vegas wrapped up their first round series, Howden already had more goals than some entire teams managed in the same round. And here's the part that should have gotten more attention. This wasn't garbage time scoring, the kind you get when a series is already decided and the other team has packed it in. These were momentum shifting, series altering goals, scored when the games were still up for grabs. The second round is where things really took off. Vegas faced a Colorado team that had just won the President's Trophy for having the best record in the entire league all season long. On paper, this was supposed to be a David versus Goliath matchup, and a lot of analysts picked Colorado to roll through. But Howden had other plans. Picture the scene. Vegas is on the road. The building is loud. The Avalanche fans are sensing blood after a late coaching change had Vegas looking shaky heading into the series. And then Howden scores. Not just once. He becomes one of the central reasons Vegas pulls off the upset, eliminating the best team in the league and advancing to the conference final. At this point, people inside the league started noticing. Teammates were calling him a workhorse. Coaches were pointing to his line as the reason Vegas had so much firepower. But outside the Vegas locker room, the headlines were still going to other names. Mitch Marner's arrival in Vegas this season had been the biggest story of the entire year, and rightfully so. His point totals this postseason are absolutely historic. But while everyone was watching Marner rack up assists and highlight real plays, Howden was quietly doing something just as remarkable. He was scoring. By the time Vegas advanced to the Stanley Cup Final, Howden's goal total had climbed to a number that made longtime Golden Knights fans go check the record books. 14 goals in a single postseason. For context, this Vegas franchise has only existed since 2017. They've made multiple deep playoff runs, including a Stanley Cup win in 2023. They've had elite goal scorers come through this locker room, and none of them, not one, had ever scored 14 goals in a single playoff run until Brett Howden did it this year. Now here's where the story gets even more interesting, because this record isn't happening in a vacuum. It's happening in the middle of one of the most chaotic Stanley Cup Finals in recent memory. Vegas is currently facing the Carolina Hurricanes, and this series has been an absolute roller coaster. Every single game so far has been a battle, with both teams trading high-scoring nights that fans and analysts say haven't been seen at this level in decades. And right now, Vegas finds itself trailing in the series. After a hard-fought Game 5 loss in Carolina, the Golden Knights are heading back home to Las Vegas, needing a win just to keep their season alive. The pressure is enormous. Lose and the season is over. Win and they force a Game 7 with a chance to defend their championship pedigree. This is exactly the kind of moment where Howden's record becomes more than just a stat on a page. It becomes a question: can he keep it going? Vegas needs every single goal they can get right now, and the player who's been quietly outscoring everyone on the roster all postseasons is about to play in the biggest game of his career on home ice, with elimination on the line. Think the pressure here for a second. Howden isn't a superstar who's used to carrying a team. He's a guy who spent years as a complimentary piece in New York before finding his footing in Vegas. And now, in the highest stakes moment of his life, he's the franchise's all-time leader in single postseason goals. With the season hanging in the balance, if Vegas wins Game 6 and forces a Game 7, you can bet Howden's name is going to be front and center of every storyline. And if he scores again, even just once more, he extends a record that, frankly, some of the best players to ever wear a Golden Knights jersey couldn't touch. But if Vegas loses, this record becomes something different. It becomes the story of a remarkable individual run on a team that ultimately came up just short. In a series so tight, so high-scoring, and so dramatic that it might be remembered as one of the best Stanley Cup Finals of this entire era. Either way, one thing is certain. Brett Howden went from a name most casual hockey fans wouldn't recognize to a player who rewrote the Vegas Golden Knights record book in real time during a Stanley Cup Final that's already being talked about as one for the ages. So here's the real question heading into Game 6. Vegas is fighting for their season at home. Howden is fighting to extend a record that's never been touched in franchise history. And the entire hockey world is about to find out if a cup final that's already broken multiple scoring records is about to get even more historic. If you want to see how this Stanley Cup Final got to this point, with both teams scoring more goals through the first 4 games than almost any final in the last 45 years, that full breakdown is on screen right now. Click it to see how we got here. 37 years old, 14 seasons with one team, And right now, Jordan Staal is scoring goals in the Stanley Cup Final that nobody has scored in over 50 years. In 5 straight games against the Vegas Golden Knights, Staal has put the puck in the net every single game. He now sits at 6 goals for the series, and that number alone puts him in a category of players that most hockey fans only read about in history books. Let's start with the record itself, because the context makes it hit harder. 5 consecutive games with a goal in the Stanley Cup Final. Only 5 players in the entire history of the NH have ever done it. And before Staal did it Thursday night in Game 5, the last time anyone pulled it off was 1973. Yvon Cournoyer playing for the Montreal Canadiens. Before Cournoyer, it was Jean Beliveau in 1956, Maurice Richard in 1951, and going all the way back to 1918, Cyclone Taylor. These are legends. These are names in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And now Jordan Staal's name sits right next to them. What makes this even more remarkable is who Staal is. He's not known as a goal scorer. He never has been. For most of his career, Staal built his reputation as one of the best defensive centers in the league. The guy you trust to shut down the other team's top line, to win face-offs in critical moments, to sacrifice stats for the good of the team. He had 2 goals in 13 playoff games before the Stanley Cup Final even started, and then the series began. And something clicked. Now he has 6 goals in 5 games. He's the oldest player in NHL history to score 6 goals in a Stanley Cup Final. And Carolina's coach Rod Brind'Amour put it best after Game 5. Doing it at his age just says a lot about him. He's our guy and he's our warrior, and I'm really happy for him. So how exactly has he been doing it? Staal isn't scoring highlight reel snipe goals from the top of the circle. Every goal he's scored in this series has come from hard work, positioning, reading plays, putting himself in the right spot at the right time. That's who he is. His Game 5 goal is a perfect example. Nikolai Ehlers carries the puck and finds Staal in the high slot. Staal redirects it, tips it over Carter Hart's left pad, and just like that, it's 1-1 in the first period. Clean, calm, decisive. His Game 4 goal was the complete opposite, and arguably the most memorable moment of the series so far. With the game tied late in the 3rd period, Staal got the puck and his feet got tangled. He started to fall. His forehand wasn't there, so he reached back with his backhand while he was practically lying on the ice, and somehow flipped it past Hart for the game winner. He didn't even know it went in at first. He put his face down on the ice and just let out a yell. That goal, that moment, is what this series has been about. He talked about it after the game. I was in my own world. It was an incredible moment, obviously, and just let a big yell go. 5 goals, all different, all clutch, and every single one of them came in a game that mattered. Here's a stat that stopped a lot of hockey people in their tracks this week. The last time Jordan Staal had a 5-game goal streak, he was 18 years old. February 2007, he was a teenager on the Pittsburgh Penguins, playing in just his first full NHL season. Fast forward 19 years. Same player, same streak. Except now he's 37. He is the only player in NHL history, regular season or playoffs, to record a 5-game goal streak as a teenager and after turning 35. Nobody else has done that on both ends of their career. It's a number that puts the entire arc of what Staal has meant to this sport into perspective. When he was 18, nobody was surprised. He was the 2nd overall pick, a physical force, a kid with a bright future ahead of him. At 37, in the Stanley Cup Final, after 14 seasons of being the unsung anchor of this franchise, that's something different entirely. His teammate Jackson Blake said it perfectly. He's a dog, like, if I'm going to be honest. That's not a knock. That's the highest compliment you can give a hockey player. It means he competes every single shift, every single game, no matter the stakes, no matter the moment. Game 5 wasn't just Staal's night. It was the night the Hurricanes reminded everyone why they're 1 win away from the Stanley Cup. Carolina beat Vegas 4-2 on Thursday at Lenovo Center in Raleigh. Andrei Svechnikov scored twice on the power play. Sebastian Aho finally broke through with his first goal of the series. And goaltender Brandon Bussi made 23 saves in his 2nd straight start in the final. Both wins. Bussi is the first goalie in NHL history to make his first 2 career playoff starts in the Stanley Cup Final and win both. That's not a footnote. That's another historic storyline running alongside everything Stahl is doing. Svechnikov was emotional after the game. "This is the biggest win in my life," personally he said. "Thank God we won that game, and obviously all focus right now in our mind is we've got one more win to get here." The Hurricanes lead the series 3-2. Game 6 is Sunday night in Las Vegas, and Carolina will be looking to become the franchise's first Stanley Cup champion since 2006, when a teenage Eric Stahl hoisted it in Raleigh. Now it's Jordan's turn, one complication for Vegas, heading into Game 6.